There is indeed a time and a place for faith. In my humble opinion, faith is not to be wasted mucking about with politics and religion. Especially not any nonsensical prophecies about either.
Good morning, Trumptopia. A special segment of the almost daily Zencast. Hosted by the incorrigible Mr. Zabu. Let's talk Trump.
Greetings and salutations, dear friends and fanatics. It is Saturday, March 6th. A lazy morning has gone by. It's 12:04 p.m. I almost said noon 04 p.m. Welcome, good morning. And hallelujah that there was zero Trump insurrection 2.0. That there was no wave of gun violence across the 50 states at every capital, that there was no doubling down at an attempt to capture the national Capitol building and take out, quote unquote, those people inside. A big, resounding silence. And I'm not saying that to mock or ridicule. I'm saying that in honest and sincere gratitude. Hallelujah and amen. That for one reason or another, none of it happened. I gotta say though, holy guacamole, talk about only in Trumptopia. Only in Trumptopia, dear friends, can you have this pentultimate of ironies, this self-decreed patriotic base that idolizes and deifies a large, tubby, squirmy, gross example of the worst of us, of the worst kinds of, capitalism and greed gone horribly publicly awry. And then, without batting an eye, point to a horrific, violent, bloody, shameful, tisk, 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 Buddha and all the other gods are like, you're doing it all wrong over there, Myanmar. Military coup. And bold-facedly believe / wish, fantasize / believe that this large, lying, orange, used car salesman of a fake billionaire has got the military in their pocket, that they would do that here. The American military commit. There's a lot that can be criticized of the system that we live in, for sure. But to think that that's going to go down, that that's really what's happening, and believe it, and want this con man of an orange spray-tanned guy to what? I don't know what they thought. Did they think that he was going to suit up and step out onto the battlefield as so many of their bizarro Trump flags cartoonishly depict him using lots of Photoshop? Did they think he was going to lock and load and go storm the castle with them? And I'm not saying that to ridicule them. I'm asking that sincerely for their own cognitive processing, right? Like, if they come to this show, they got to hear that tough love question. I say that with love. Listen, folks, when it boils down to it, we shouldn't be that surprised, right? We live in a world where those who, quote, represent the people usually are way off base in the way they're representing them some way or another. And, there's a lot of obvious problems in the category of greed and corruption. And as I've said before, and I've been ridiculed and mocked by hardcore conspiracy theorists, some of which, the conspiracy theory community irony, are probably looking smugly down their noses at the Q phenomena, going, ugh, I never fell for that. Meanwhile, the Earth is flat and FEMA's going to kill us all. Now, I'm not saying all conspiracy theories fake. Don't go putting carts before horses with your assumptions about me. But what I am saying is that clearly there has been over the last 4 years, and maybe longer, a concerted effort to target, manipulate, and leverage political ideology to new extremes, right? And as I said at the very beginning, tragically, many of these episodes are, quote, lost, because I followed some what sounded like good advice at the time, but I overthought it and took some extra steps that were totally unnecessary. I shoulda, coulda, woulda done thing. I now see in my mind, thinking bureaucratically, what I coulda, shoulda done with my Sprecher account instead of delete everything that one time way back in the day when the show was young and was sort of gaining a little bit of traction, but was really radically how are you guys falling for this about Trump? Because I launched this podcast not terribly late into that election cycle, if not immediately after he was elected. I forget which. I was doing videos first. Those are still up. But I digress. Way back then, I said, this is like a pendulum swing to the extreme right stress test. And if I may be so bold as to say, in response to one of my own opening questions, how will the world respond to this? To this whole phenomena, Trump having been president is something we must reckon with. Because despite all the argument, all the noise of argumentation, if you cut through it like you do like I do with the flat earth versus globe earth noise, it's like you're all busy arguing and you're missing a much more important point. And lo and behold, this much more important point renders either of the models you're arguing in favor of kind of moot and useless. Stop arguing about them. It's fine. Believe whichever one you want. Don't believe in whichever one you want. This point is larger than that. And should, theoretically, without much arguing, light your way towards seeing that the argument itself is a bit nonsensical. Right? That's, if anything, exactly the kind of role I was trying to go, hey. And I wasn't alone in this. Plenty of people went, wait, what? You want to put who in office? Here we are, friends. We've survived. We've cleared to the other side. Joe Biden isn't a robot or a clone or a face-off transplant, which, by the way, was the most... I can't believe... Now, some people out there commentating on this when this emerged and was circulated and crossed my social media postings. I was like, what is this? And someone was like, well, that's got to be satire. Like, of course, no one believes that. But I think I heard people believing it, right? Like, trickle-down economics is a lie. But, like, trickle-out believing in nonsense just because it's been repeated a bunch, that's real. The human animal is much more complex than we give it credit for. And I'm not trying to put anybody down here, folks. What I'm saying is there was a real and serious orchestrated manipulation campaign. Let's call it that. And I don't know, I think I was out there pretty boldly daring to say in comments to people, I'm fairly certain this stinks of PSYOP. Everyone was like, where's your proof? And I'm like, I'm not basing this on someone else's claim. I'm looking at the content, I'm looking at the way people are behaving, and I'm thinking, I don't know about you guys, but this is exactly the kind of thing that we're supposed to look out for and call out as PSYOP, not because someone else said so, but because it kind of stinks of it by the form and function of its very nature, of its form and function, right? If it sounds like PSYOP and manipulates people like PSYOP, then maybe it's PSYOP, even if it's amateur, even if it's a prank gone wrong, gone horribly, horribly wrong. At one point, I did see people circulating claims that whoever had initiated the Q thing had come out and said, sorry, we just wanted to see how many suckers we could funnel into this fundraiser and then like tap it out at so much money. But then apparently like it got legs and it started running. I don't know. I'm not pretending to know. Like I said, I'm like over here looking at it from its net effect perspective. Like how have I felt about it? How has it looked? How has it stank? How has it impacted the world around me as I sit and observe it as impartially as I can? Granted, I still form my opinions and talk about them. I am a podcast show host. But there you go, friends. It's one of those memes. I saw this about halfway between now and when I first was so bold as to claim that I felt like it was very likely to be a psychological operation, either official or unofficial. From whom? Who knows? The Chinese, the Russians, the Americans. There are, covert operations all over the place. And people who are like in the thick of conspiracy theory laugh. Because one of the things, and I'll button in on this, and this is why like I'm always sort of marginalized and laughed at by conspiracy theorists. It's like the first thing conspiracy theory people do once they settle into the community is they stop questioning the content. They get to a certain level of, I'm convinced this all must be real. So you'll forgive me if after 30 years of impartially trying not to get sucked into it, observation of conspiracy theory content, the conspiracy theory community and its general vibe and modality of engaging others on social media platforms as a means of public discourse, and historical events like world events. Conspiracy theory content, like there's a meme I like to post to people now. It's like, just wait till the conspiracy theorists find out that they're all part of a conspiracy theory plot. It's miswritten. I would have written it slightly differently. I would have written conspiracy theory plot, not just conspiracy theory, to distribute or disseminate misinformation using conspiracy theory content. Because that's happening, folks. Just look around. As I've so interestingly pointed out, so much conspiracy theory content seems to find itself on one side or the other of intractable social argument, wedge issues. And seems to always, no matter what issue, no matter what subject, whether it's aliens or starseeds, because you better be believing that whatever is doing this, however this is happening, it's encroaching in on fringe communities of the spiritual kind too. I often see people parroting content and or reposting it, thinking they've found some spiritual gem, and they're not seeing the sort of right there in your face us versus them conditioning that's worked in using, whatever subtle, interesting engineering ways it is. So it's everywhere, right? And this phenomena of a group of people believing a sort of extracurricular rider on, it was whatever Q is, whether it's the CIA, and I hate to call out individual, because I also respect law and order. You can do a couple of things at once. You can call out conspiracy theory content and corruption in the government and still believe in law and order and in the ideals of a country at their best. So don't get me all twisted up. You can, I do things at once. I can support the system as it exists and the people in it, and also refuse to label myself a statist. Whoa! Does that offend people? I don't know. But you know who is offended? DJ Zed is, because I'm a minute and 45 seconds late on letting him mix for you a little bit of something he calls fractal recursion everywhere, a progressive house remix live audio entertainment track for your listening pleasure. Don't be falling for none of that zero-sum scapegoating. As Shakespeare would have said, there's the rub. That's where they get you, folks. I guess I'm just rephrasing what's at the core of us versus them tribalistic manipulation. If, fundamentally speaking, no matter how otherwise woke, enlightened, well-informed, well-intentioned, well-meaning any bit of content or any bit of talking points may sound, if somehow or another in and of themselves or in the matrix of like the cultural package that they come in, if they're edging you, like one of those little coin drop games you used to see. Some kids are too young for this, but instead of smoke, there used to be a day where in restaurants, in the waiting area near the bathrooms, there would be like a place to sit, and kind of in the hallway into the bathroom, a smoke dispenser, like coin operated smoke vending machine for cigarettes. They took those out, and some people were like, well, we got to put something in. And anybody that it was like, big gaming parlors are kind of starting to wane as a business, sometimes would pick out funny games. That's how you ended up with like claw machines in Marie calendars, right? Because there's a little bit of revenue. There was a 8x6 square foot bit of machine there that made me money. Now I need something else. Obviously, those are broad stroke historical brushes I'm painting with there, but one of those like the claw machine, one of those game type devices, and often instead of coins, I've seen them in Vegas with actual like money and or gambling coins, I think. But I've also seen them with like in Chuck E. Cheese's and in other places, and in just like standing alone in the middle of a restaurant with like toys for kids. But the coolest ones are the ones where it's just like real coins. You just drop a quarter in, and it becomes part of the mass that instead of a claw, there's like a cliff, and there's this pile, and the claw machine, not a claw, but this lever, this panel is slowly edging it, and it's random, but it gets closer and closer and closer, and then it kind of like cycles away, and then you got to put more coins towards the back near the wall, so that like you try to drop like a $2-3 in there right then, in hopes that it's gonna like lock up and cause enough traction that it's gonna dump out $10-15 in your favor. At any rate, that slow, gentle, often recursive or cyclical sort of edging you towards stuff, if a given narrative, a given media thing, a given meme, a given picture meme, word meme, idea meme, people forget, like memes existed before the internet, folks. They were like cutesy things that you would say or do, and or often together. You know what TikTok is? We used to do that in front of each other, sort of, without the floating text and the filters and the imported music. But people behaviorally would convey memes and stuff, especially at gatherings and parties. There'd be like little cutesy, flirtsy behavioral things. Not to go on a deep dive about that. But if any piece of content is gently, indirectly pushing you towards the cliff of zero-sum scapegoating, like, that's an ego trap game. No one wins. Everyone ends up dead in zero-sum scapegoating, in a zero-sum world, in of finite stuff that needs to be commodified. That's what we've built. Between you, me, them, us, the whole world, this society that we live in, and it's hard to acknowledge. We don't want to criticize the world we live in, right? Especially if we're lucky. And by circumstance or personal effort or combination or whatever, we're in an okay place. But millions of people are not. Let us never forget. Whenever we discuss in this public discourse kind of way, that millions of people are not. And that pissing in each other's faces, playing zero-sum games of blaming this group or that group, those horrible people or that horrible people, and all in order to bend over backwards rationalizing, defending an ideological construct, which ultimately, when we no longer argue about which one's better and see them all as interrelated tools, we see them as tools. Toxic ones. Toxic tools that maybe, just maybe, aren't so great in terms of, like best operating procedures for being 7 billion people strong on Mother Earth. Maybe, just maybe, thriving as a species has got abso-fucking nothing to do with, no offense, organized religion and organized politics as we see and know them today. Who am I to ask those questions? I am the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. I'm going to turn to the news and check out scan through some of the most fascinating headlines of the recent few days. I have touched on the universal basic income. Well, there seems to be sort of like second tier news that keeps cropping up from the one or two different places that have, and I remember hearing about this, and I may have already talked about this on the show, but a city here or there have been undergoing the social experiment, scary music now, of testing out what it would be like to pay everyone some sort of basic universal income. Just another one of several headlines about a city that did that with just $500 per month. And apparently, good things happened. Wow, it doesn't make too much sense. You give people that don't have any money, and then they can do the stuff that they need to do, and then that does what? Generates economic growth? If you create a system that's all about economic growth, why build unfair inequality obstacles into it if you really want economic growth, real economic growth, right? From the bottom up, healthy economic growth that's sustainable. Am I crazy for asking those questions? Maybe. Then again, I'm the guy saying, hey, we shouldn't fall for these ego traps. Trump, as a symptomology of what's wrong with our world, had this secondary symptomology, this organized attempt to manipulate people above and beyond the political machinations of Trump himself. Now that, in and of itself, as a now sort of, seemingly self-evident artifact of history, right? Let us count our blessings that January 6th was it, and that March 4th, or maybe we can celebrate it on the 2-month anniversary, March 6th, today, was the day when, that particular house of cards, this extracurricular idea that Trump was going to do the same thing that the military in Myanmar is doing and arrest everybody and reinstate himself as some sort of reconciled 19th president of the United States. Now, I'm a little concerned how many of them are moving the goalposts to the 14th or the 15th or the 20th. But guess what? A month from now, we'll be sitting around talking about, things that Biden's doing, where coronavirus is at, whether it got better or worse in the intervening weeks. Because we're at a crucial juncture point, folks. If you didn't realize it, yes, we've been on a downturn lately, huzzah. And that may have been because sort of enough people started getting vaccinated, the Venn diagram of people getting the vaccine, which I know, I get it. There's a lot of like counter argument about the vaccine, and there's a lot of reasonable sounding reasonable sounding reasons for one, might choose not to. It has been up until recently not even available enough. In fact, right now, right this hot second, if I spent, 8 hours trying to get a vaccine, I bet I probably couldn't because I don't qualify, right? And there's not enough for those who do. There hasn't been. Apparently that's shifting. But our numbers have been ridiculously weak. We're still at, I think, as of just last week, we were at 8% of the population vaccinated, right? Don't quote me on that. That number's probably updated. It's probably as high as 20 now. And maybe I'm wrong and that's wishful thinking. We're still lagging somewhere at like 10, 11%. I don't know. Am I a blind faith believer in the vaccine? No. Have I seen any believable reason to be alarmed about it? Just enough. A few folks that were like high profile enough in getting it got worse and or died in the 2 weeks after getting it, that it's like, and there has been some formally reported mishaps of people having bad reactions, etc. But that's all been like really, statistically speaking, in the broadest, terms of science, kind of negligibly low. Now, every life is precious, etc. But just like the voter fraud argument, yes, some people vote fraudulently, but it's been like less than 12 people. That's not enough to swing the election. That's not, quote, stealing the election. And all of the states that were supposedly stolen verified their counts multiple times, both by hand and by machine, with bipartisan, local, non-deep state volunteer certifiers. And the moment we start going off the deep end and assuming somehow that everybody that rolled up to be part of the voting volunteer brigade was corrupt and part of the deep state, then you're like, you're blind faithing the conspiracy theory content without questioning it. And that is the problem, right? Like, what's the big bad thing that organized religion has been known to do historically throughout? Use manipulative, persuasive arguments and the sort of the literal and figurative fear of God to manipulate people into compliance and usually into supporting corrupt behavior. And ultimately, in the worst case scenarios, the butchering of others for profit, one way or another. On that note, it is, for I am forever an optimist and a believer in the human animal, right? Like, it is, of course, a part of human nature to be filled with rage about ideas and be willing to kill each other. But that's the thing we've got to heal in order to transcend ourselves. So, turning to that other bit of beautiful breaking news, this is a first. And I got this vibe from Francis when he first came about. I didn't like the last guy, a literal former youth Nazi. I mean, great. Supposedly by having become the Pope, that guy had, changed his mind about all that. And in theory he did, but, it doesn't look so hot to have former enthusiastic members of the youth Nazi party in your leadership, higher order ranking members, generally speaking, right? As an institution, to be infiltrated by former Nazis is a bad look, but I digress. Francis, I know, has his flaws too, and the people critique him for stuff for when he was new in the church, relatively mid-level in the church. Do I remember what those things are right this hot second? No. I'm a flawed individual. What do you want from me? Am I going to go dig them up right now? No. Because, and can I say the exact same couple of, declarative warning label statements about the other guy with this news breaking moment here? Yes, totally. I'm not going to get into it. But in a wow, I didn't have this on my bingo card. I should be ashamed of myself. The Grand Ayatollah Sistani and His Majesty the Pope Francis have sat for a delightfully interesting and silly photo op, and had a meeting, a momentous meeting, a historic meeting, to the degree that it is of importance to people who give importance to the meeting of two geriatric old men dressed up in silly robes and wearing interesting hats. I mean, those who don't believe in God at all, that's where you can draw, who cares? These two old guys wearing anachronistic, antiquated, silly fashion of power from ye olde ancient times, and seemingly representing two wildly divergent ideological power bases that historically and even sort of technically, ideologically, trace their origins back to the same, quote, founding father in Abraham. Thus, the three religions are the Abrahamic traditions, and for anybody who does take it seriously, it is quite an astounding thing that the two leaders met and spoke of peace and spoke of unity and spoke of transcending the differences. Is it just lip service? Is it just a photo op? Who knows? Are either of the two organized religions as wildly evil as the worst of the hearsay might have us believe? I don't know. But are they each free of guilt / blood on their hands, literally, figuratively, historically? Absolutely not. Thus, if this is authentic, which, I don't know, how does one test that beyond having the ability to have been in the room and sensed it, right? And really been there to check the vibe. But let's take the what if question a little, take it up a notch. Presuming this was authentic and that these two somber leaders of serious religions that want to be better versions of themselves, that want to live up to their own propaganda of being about peace and love, and want to transcend their admittedly horrific pasts, each in their own delightful way. For humanity has what? What human organization that has a long enough history is free from blood on their hands? And what member of the human species, given how suicidally toxic our ideological and physical societies are, that they are coming together and presenting an example of bridging the divide and trying to speak into existence a transcendence of the conflicts. I'll take it. As much as I am not necessarily inclined to be a member of any given organized religion, and I think that in the long run, humanity is going to take a good hard look at their own relationships within the communities of, because religions are a manifold, complicated thing. There's the organized bureaucracy, which has its own history of power being wielded. And then there's the base, right? The people. And that which that they try to do, which is essentially live in proper communion with the model, the ideological construct of divinity and how to deal with it they've been given. So just at that level of analysis, those are two different entities coexisting under one umbrella. So as representatives of the two respective bureaucracies, these spiritual, intellectual oligarchies of power, good on them if that follows through into the manifestation of genuine goodwill, genuine transcendent spiritual healing, and people around the world doing the inner work, including these guys, right? Presumably doing the inner work required to transcend, et cetera, and heal those divisions, then maybe, just maybe, they're onto something. In the long run, if I were to be asked as a futurist, as a prognosticator of things that very likely might happen in the future, based on my own complex matrix of, things I know and things I've learned, et cetera, I think eventually the same sort of inner work will continue at a community depth level, a level of depth into the communities that are the bases that provide the power for these political, religious, intellectual oligarchies of bureaucratic power structures that are the organized religions. And there's going to be a grand reckoning, right? We see it in politics, kinda. There's hope. There's hope that this grand reckoning will render a transformation. As I've liked to call out before, organized religion can, in its worst examples, operate as a distraction from true spiritual communion-based community. And maybe that's the path of transformation and metamorphosis and alchemy that spiritual-minded people inside of the structures of organized religion and around the fringes, people who sort of are near it, like, I was a Catholic, and then I tried to be a generic Christian, and then I tried to be some of the other kinds of Christians, and I'm a person who believes I have a direct personal relationship with Yeshua, the Christos, right? And that might rub some people who call themselves Christian the wrong way, but others might jive with that. And ultimately, I think that all the various structures, like I hope for politics, are going to be worked on through this inner working, this inner realization, this inner transformative work that people are engaging in willy-nilly, sporadically, right? Like, yes, some of it comes from within organized movements. Some of it comes from within organized religious movements. Some of it comes from within organized spiritual community movements. But ultimately, like sunflowers turning towards the sun itself, humanity has this transformative power. And we can realize it inside of any human endeavor. And that, dear folks, turning full circle, is the glimmer of hope that we have, especially right now, as millions of people are coming to terms with the inaccurate expectations and beliefs they were misled into believing about one of these corrupt, complicit political actors. For that is what Trump himself has always been. Because they play that role not because anyone's got a gun to their head, but because that's a sort of meta-archon. No, sorry. That's a transitive noun for a thing in the transitive multidimensional space. That is a meta-archetype here in the material world for us to play out. Human beings can become politicians, and they can either engage in toxic politics or in healing, constructive, civic action. Looking at what Trump did, he was about greed and power and corruption and trying to get away with stuff. And he got away with manipulating a really serious chunk of his base all the way up until now. And what does that cause them? Well, for the most agitated amongst them, that's gotten them incarcerated because they've done things that they realize maybe they shouldn't have. And for a great many else, it's gotten them whipped up and ready and wishing and being willing to foment violence and not knowing what to do about it. How will the world respond? First, with an empathetic processing of all of that. We need to facilitate that, dear folks. As anybody who's been observant enough of the whole phenomenon to have been outside of it, whether you were anti-Trump or not, right? Some folks were not even explicitly anti-Trump, but were explicitly outside of any of it because they're like, nope, no thanks, don't need to be part of that. We need to facilitate all these folks going through this letdown, this disheartening disappointment, and the cognitive dissonance. Not using that as a judgmental, putting them down term, but as a statement of fact. Like, who else is going to be going through? I mean, everyone's going through. Let's make this clear. We all go through cognitive dissonance. Every last one of us. Something about our lives isn't as it appears in our minds, either because we create an illusion, which is real, not fake, just isn't what it appears to be, or because others have created an illusion for us, etc. And then things like this happen. And the world keeps turning. And there's good news happening around us. And we've got to share the energy, emotional processing of our friends and neighbors and relatives. And if we've got no one close to us, if you're lucky enough, not to be too rude, if you're for whatever, for better or worse, in the situation that you find yourself to have zero Trump relations, dig a little deeper because you probably do and you just don't realize it. And if you really genuinely just don't, you have ties, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, physical ties to people who are probably struggling with the ego trap of judging and hating the Trump supporters. We got to get that shit processed out too, folks. We got to do that spiritual work, dear friends. We got to end that hate. It was never healthy. I mean, there's one thing is to take stand and be anti this political thing and be be aggressively anti-politically anti someone who's a politician. That's our voice, right? No matter how grumbly, annoyingly disgruntled the politicians themselves may get about it. They are public servants. Period. Full stop. And until they stop acting like overlords, trying to stay in power and control for extended periods of time, and or get away with extracurricular work deals that make their family members money, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, say no more. Because it happens everywhere. Never mind Mitch McConnell's wife. Never mind that Trump family, vis-a-vis Ivanka, did all kinds of weird things. It's funny how they accuse Biden of being in the pocket of China. Meanwhile, Ivanka Trump literally did all kinds of wild, crazy, lucrative. They applaud that. That's just good business. Hello? It's this us versus them blinders on. Said I was going to put a pin in it and play some music. Here is Sunset Drive Variants. DJ Zed remixing an Organic House remix live audio entertainment package. The world goes on, my friends. I'll leave you with this what if to contemplate. And forgive me if it's redundant. But what if they're just people too, yo? All the bad guys, all the villains, all the folks that we've been told by this source or that other one to fear, revile, hate, fight against, destroy, eliminate, remove. What if they're just people too, yo? No matter how... I mean, it sounds stupid when you put it up against, like, something as horrific as Hitler. What if Hitler was just a person too, yo? And he was just fucked up and just needed to be healed? Is that insane? That doesn't mean all the horrible things need to be tolerated, right? There's a meme going around, which I endorse. Forgiveness, unconditional, and maybe I'm extemporizing here and making up a new wording of this meme. But this is the way I would say it if I hadn't seen the meme in 10 years and wanted to tell someone about it. Unconditional forgiveness does not mean unconditional acceptance of unacceptable behavior. Do not be fooled into thinking that, therefore withholding your forgiveness. The central step, work, key to the whole process, as we have been handed down by many a tradition, to healing ourselves, healing each other, healing the species, is the root of it, is the starting point, is forgiveness. We still got to hold all the horrible things accountable, but in that holding them accountable, we cannot become as horrible as the bad guys that we hate. For hate does not drive out hate, it just turns us into that which we hate. And what would be the point of that, dear friends? Gotta avoid that nonsense. Until next time, friends, I have been your fractally recursive, rambling, intellectual, pontificating radio talk show host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo, encouraging you to take the time to look within and set aside all the mental constructs and just be. Just be with yourself, with some music or some sunshine and silence or some moonlight. Do it safely. Do it without causing other people to freak out, don't fucking... But meditate in nature, in a closet. In a closet's deep. If you've never meditated in silence or with meditation tracks in a closet, in deep darkness, go and do that.
And that is the latest madness from behind the orange wall. Thank you for listening to GMT, a special segment of the Almost Daily Zencast. Stay woke, Trumptopia. Stay woke.
And I say that sarcastically, right? Addendum bonus thought. If you are a spiritual person and you're following this or that spiritual author or whatever, and you're part of spiritual communities, be wary, man. You think the ego isn't trying to infiltrate that? Being woke is something people got to wake up from, as the one meme says. I love that meme. Spiritual puppy dog face meme. Being woke is just another... How does it go? Oh, I'm terrible at this. Anyways, you get my point.